Ms. Thomas-Moore.
Thank you. I would like to start with PC07, actual parts, PC07, Social Emotional Wellbeing Universal Screening Solution, Panorama Education. So this is one of my concerns with this particular company and this contract, is that we are asking questions about the students' social emotional health and is being used to determine the mental health condition of our students. Is that correct?
I'm going to defer that to Dr. Walker. Ask her to join me here.
Thank you, and I can assure you absolutely not. We would not want a diagnosis be made by a survey in any case.
No, but it is using, so then what decision is it helping us inform if we're asking the question?
So there are multiple purposes for which we could use this. One can be driving some of our programs, as I spoke about with Sal, but it also can identify students who might have greater concerns. And in that case, we would work with that student, have a school counselor, have someone speak to that student to see if there was a greater concern.
Okay,
It
so
may
these would be health concerns, correct? Mental health concerns.
It could be that they're not feeling well that day. It could be mental health. There
Okay.
could be a lot of things that show from that would not necessarily speak to mental health.
Okay.
I could fill out a survey and say I'm disheartened today, but that doesn't necessarily speak to my mental health. But I then provide a check-in to that child and learn more.
Okay. So one of the very concerning things with this particular contractor is that we have seen in the past, and maybe Mr. Blum will have to weigh in on this, when a contractor that collects data is sold, they sell the company to someone else, who purchases it, then also purchases the data and the ability to use the data. So my concern is that this particular company, the big backers of this company are Facebook and Google. And we don't know the contractual relationship between this company and Facebook and Google. And the consultant will be collecting data that definitely has value to a number of different industries, including social media and those that I mentioned, and organizations. So it's very concerning to me that we are taking information, some of which can be used to make observations or opinions regarding the mental health of the children in our school system, and that data is leaving the school system. I know that we have a data privacy agreement, but that doesn't necessarily protect us based on current relationships that this company has, or if the company is sold.
Well, to that aspect, I'll tell you that we are contracting with Panorama. They are agreeing to our terms. They have our data privacy in place. That's who we're contracting with. If they are doing something with our data that is outside of the guardrails, if you will, of our agreement, they're in breach, and we will go after them.
Okay, but the problem is when they're in breach, the data of our students is already gone. That is what concerns me. Is it possible for us to put in the contract, if it is not there within the data sharing agreement, that if they are sold, our data for our students or anything derived therefrom is not part of the agreement?
We can do that.
Mr. Blum, is that possible?
Good evening, Dr. Panorama, Chairwoman, members of the Board of Education, Mark Blum, General Counsel. Yes, as Mr. Pindell just indicated, we can add that to the contract.
Okay, thank you. The other issue that I have with this that I think, at the very least, if we go forward with this contract, that parents must be given an opportunity to opt their child in and not an opt-out or a requirement that the students partake in the survey. Is that something else we can do, Dr. Martirano?
Go specifically with that, Mr. Blum, would that be an inclusionary piece that would be typical of those kind of contracts?
That would be here within the Howard County Public Schools. I would assume that we would have
I know, but I'm asking
control.
specifically.
Yes, Dr. Marana, by contract, we would do that. We could, can do that. Let me restate that to be clear. Yes, by contract, yes, we can do that.
Thank you.
So can we do it by contract as well as do it as a practice?
That's what I was asking for that reason.
So we can do both.
It probably wouldn't behoove us to have this if we don't have more census data, and we have trouble getting parents to consent to family file, and so it would be challenging to get a large number of consents for this purpose. So I feel very comfortable with an opt-out, but I have concerns about an opt-in.
Well, here's the problem with an opt-out, is that parents will, that takes control away from parents. Our job is not to take control away from parents. Our job is to work in partnership with the parents. And the only way to have a fruitful and honest partnership is for parents to be able to be fully informed and have full control over data, especially mental health data that the school system is collecting on their children and then shipping off to an outside entity.
I absolutely agree, and they could absolutely opt out like they do with youth risk behavior, with sharing other information.
The rights of the parents must trump our desire to collect data. This is a very slippery slope. This is very dangerous for us to do this. We are not the parents. The parents are the parents. The parents must have the control.
Maybe it would help you to hear some of the questions. I'll ask Dr. Schulmeyer to share what kinds of questions it is, because I believe you think that this is more mental health than it is.
But social emotional learning, it's the social emotional piece. And I have been following this ever since the cell thing started and all of that. Some of the questions are concerning. So I think it makes better sense to have an overall policy of having parents opt in so that at some point in time, if the questions change or something else happens that changes the conditions. I mean, the parents should be able should opt in every time every year. They should be notified.
I think in
of
some
this.
ways that's like asking parents to opt in every time a teacher asks how a child's doing. And so I have some concerns about that because, for example, we use that instructionally all the time. Like at the beginning of a class period, I could say, how are you all feeling? We fill it out on a Google survey. And that's a pretty typical thing we do to help take stock of how our class is doing. And we don't tell parents every time we do that. And I think it would be a challenge to do so. So I think that we still have yet to build this tool with Panorama. We do not have all of the questions. But I do think it's a slippery slope of every time we do any sort of dipstick around well-being that we would be informing people in depth about every single opportunity. And so I do think that we have to think about that before we make a decision about this contract that way.
But we are amassing data.
I just want to remind you, you have 1 minute, 49 seconds.
I will hold my time.
Okay. So, Ms. Marlowe?
I want to thank you for bringing these contracts forward. I think they're important. I would support them, or I primarily support them because they are an opt-out, not an opt-in. The value of them would be degraded significantly if we did not have, if we had to opt in on everything. And we know this from everything from family file to participation in conferences. Like our families have a lot going on. And if this is really important to them, they will opt their child out. And to assume that they need to take their valuable time to opt in and say, yes, I want this done every time it's to happen, then we're putting a giant onus on our families and on our educators who are administering it. It's just one more thing. And we had our union president or president of HCEA come and tell us how everyone's already overburdened. Let's not create more for them. So I would like to go ahead and move the question.
Okay. So I'm Lex. Let me click start. I have a question about P